Hi everyone, here's the Book Chemist once again, and today I'm reviewing The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, a book with which I have some kind of history. I have been having this volume in my room for about 10 years, maybe, since the time my high school teacher gave it to us, to my class, as a reading assignment. And now there are lots of awesome things to say about my high school literature teacher. She was an enlightened woman. She is the woman who made me discover H.P. Lovecraft for the first time. But the time she gave us The Name of the Rose, we were like 16, 17. It wasn't one of her most enlightened moments. This is, like, say what you will about The Name of the Rose, this is not the kind of book 16-year-olds are supposed to be reading. Not that there was any risk of that back then. I think I just checked the Wikipedia page of the novel before the whole assignment. Anyway, recently I got very interested in Eco's fiction, and last year I read numero zero, number zero, Eco's last novel before his untimely death, and I loved it, and it even ended up in my top 20 books I read in 2015. And this summer I finally decided to check out The Name of the Rose, Eco's most famous, most acclaimed novel by far. It's also probably gonna be the last non-American novel I read, at least for a while. Now, as any literature student already knows, Umberto Eco is very much the fucking OG in our field. He is one of the most important theoreticians and critics of the 20th century, especially in the fields of semiotics and narratology. He wrote a very important book called How to Write a Thesis, a University Thesis or Dissertation, which is very famous in Italy. If you ask me, it should be compulsory reading in any university. It has some beautiful insight into what it is to be an academic in the field of the humanities, what it is to be a university student. He is, of course, a very famous novelist. He is one of the most important writers in European postmodernism, especially in Italian postmodernism. Probably the only book more famous and more studied than The Name of the Rose is Italo Calvino's If on a Winter's Night, A Traveler. Also, although he was born in Novara and taught mostly, I think, in Bologna, he lived in Milan, and he was one of Milan's most prominent intellectual figures, so represent. But enough of all that, how is the actual book? The book is very much of a mixture. It is very much of a pastiche in the best postmodern tradition. It is part a mystery novel about two monks coming to an abbey in northern Italy and facing a series of mysterious crimes. It is part a philosophical treatise. It is partially a historical novel about the world of the Middle Ages, especially the intellectual world of the Middle Ages. All of these parts are equally present in the novel, I'd say, which is not especially good for the flow of the novel. One thing I have to admit is that coming into the book at first, I was expecting something completely different, most notably because I know that The Name of the Rose was an international bestseller. This is not the kind of bestseller you'd expect from something that is also a mystery novel, because, you know, being also a philosophical treatise and about medieval theology, this is fucking heavy. Throughout the years, I've read a few books by Italian university professors, a few novels, I mean, and I'm talking about Italian-born university professors. The ones I've read from British people tend to be awesome. Italian-born university professors have this tendency, when they write fiction, to throw into their fiction all of their academic knowledge, so that you find a medieval romance that is really about the minutiae of medieval literature. You have this story about witches in northern Italy that is more of a paper on medieval theology. And The Name of the Rose, as much as it pains me to admit this, kinda falls into that same trap. This is clearly the book of someone who was immensely knowledgeable about the topic of medieval thought and medieval philosophy, and who did not really try to mitigate his knowledge in the book by sweetening it for the reader. He literally threw at you some very interesting discussions about all of these topics that are gonna be very interesting to you if you are a theology PhD, or if you are a classics scholar, or if you're interested in medieval history. but maybe not too much if you are a normal person. And it does the book no good, in my opinion, that the mystery is so compelling, that side of the book is so interesting and thrilling, because you have these action sequences or even just these deduction sequences when you find this main character with a like a Franciscan friar version of Sherlock Holmes. You have this guy like inquiring into the mystery and trying to solve it. All of these parts are so thrilling and so compelling that when you find them interrupted by 60 fucking pages of people discussing whether Jesus had a purse, that's kind of a killer, like of a party pooper. Oh, and by the way, about the mystery, I went into the book knowing full well about the reason for the murders, the dynamics of the murders, the details of the whole plot, mostly because I saw the movie The Name of the Rose a few years ago, and by the way, the two are quite different, I have to say, and also because I think that if you are Italian, this is one of those plots you know automatically. Just like, you know, with Star Wars, it's probably hard for you not to know that Darth Vader is that, like, relative of that other person. But if you don't know like the details of the murder, if you don't know about the mystery, by all means do read this book before anyone can spoil it to you, because I can only imagine how awesome it is to find everything out throughout reading the actual book instead of getting it spoiled for you. In that case too, you should know that the mystery is gonna be interspersed with very long dialogues about minutiae of medieval thought, with very long historical digressions and reflections. And this really, with the kind of content that if you were to write a novel like this and give it to an editor or an author or an agent, I'm 100% sure they're gonna throw it back at you and tell you that it's awesome, but that it needs to be half its length. Actually, of course, if you see The Name of the Rose as a mystery novel, you know how most mystery novels are not that long after all. This is 500 pages and very dense, so you know there's something fishy from the outside. All of this considered, do I mean that The Name of the Rose is flawed, or is it a bad book, or that I wouldn't suggest it, at least not to anybody? Far from it. The Name of the Rose is utterly awesome. It's the triumph of bookishness, it's a love declaration, a love letter to books and to literature. Not only because it features so many reflections about the nature of books, about the reason why we read books, and the order they provide us against the bigger disorder and confusion of history. Not only because it features wonderful reflections on bookish people, on the way they lose themselves within books, on the way they react to reality differently, on the way books are actually about books more than about the outer world, but also because its very own flaws, which are not really flaws in a way, its very own, like being so long and so filled with reflections, work toward to its own good up to a certain point, because they create this wonderful world, this very well-rounded medieval world, this small abbey, if we want, this self-included reality in which you can get lost for the time that you read the book. The narrative that frames the found manuscript, which is the largest part of this narrative, Umberto Eco, specifies how the good thing about this book is that it is a book about books. It has nothing to do with the contemporary world, with its problems and issues. He says that some of his contemporaries, some other writers, believe you should only write to change the world, but that this is something proudly different. This has nothing to do with the problems of today's world. It is, in a way, sheer escapism. All of its discussions, all of its problems have nothing to do with your reality. And I'm still not sure if Eco wasn't actually fucking with me back there, but still, that is something very beautiful. This is a corner of isolation, a personal retreat you can go on to escape all of the problems, all of the dynamics and the complications of today's world into this fascinating, scary, upsetting, ugly, but awesome medieval abbey. Just like some people go on a retreat in actual abbeys, immersed in beautiful landscapes for 1 week, 2 weeks, to disconnect with today's world, you can do that through the pages of Eco's beautiful, heavy, amazing mystery. except that this costs much less and you can carry it wherever you want in your backpack. The Name of the Rose, I have to stress it again, is a heavy reading. It's not a reading for everybody, but it's a book for every bookish person out there, for every book lover. Even the fact that, like, you know, as I told you before, agents or editors will probably reject it nowadays, it's not because it's a bad book, it's just because it's not the kind of book that would sell as easily as it could have. But that's good too. It's good that there's people out there like Umberto Eco who could afford themselves to, you know, get published even in this form, that could afford to write books like this. That's good, that's needed. The Name of the Rose is very much like other very heavy Italian books. The one that came to my mind most often while I was reading is The Betrothed, I Promessi Sposi, very famous 19th century Italian novel, historical novel. It's a very long and quite heavy book. It alternates a thrilling and entertaining narrative with very dense historical passages. But once you get to the end of the book, once you finish the book, the historical, the dense parts, the heavy parts will be behind you forever, and all of the good you will have found in the book will stay with you forever, and you will have found a true treasure. If you consider yourself a book lover of any kind, do read The Name of the Rose and get lost in the Abbey yourself, as legions of readers have already done. Know that it's heavy and it's gonna take a long time, some passages are going to be boring, it's going to be worth it. Fun fact, I read online while I was researching the book that Eco himself didn't really like it and thought it was by far the worst among his own novels. I can kinda see why, and that only makes him look more awesome to my eyes, and it saddens me a lot to know that I will never be able to meet him. But, you know, we can still meet him in his awesome fiction. Let me know what you think about The Name of the Rose, guys. Let me know if you saw the ending coming, if you didn't have it spoiled for you by other people. I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.